associate professor in the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, or so-called MGIMO University, in the Department of International Relations and Foreign Policy of Russia. I'm also a long-time observer, researcher, and independent expert on their club governance mechanisms, being the original director for the G8, now G20 research group of the University of Toronto. And I have pleasure of coming here to do research in coordination with my now friends, hopefully, from their from multilateral organizations and relations group, and all other students and stuff that works for BBC, very on their role of their BRICS in the multilateral institutions. So I think I would like to say thank you, because the best portion of my stay here was interacting with all of you. Thank you. BRICS coordination and how it works and what's the potential for it in future for the multilateral organizations, I would like to say that BRICS, in my view, with all their problems it can have, with all the divergences of views, with different agenda and the priorities they put ahead within their foreign policies, I think it has potential, not because they are against the rules, and they want it, not against, but they want to change the rules that are now in act in the world, that were actually put in place before they came to power, but also because there's more and more things that are positive things that are coming to the agenda, where they can share interests and where they can find the commonality. So what's been done so far? BRICS did start at the Russian initiative. I wouldn't talk about Primakov conceptual idea of multi-vector diplomacy, because this was one of their projects that eventually realized into RIC, first RIC format, and then BRIC and BRICS now. But Russia came to realize its commonality of interest with emerging systemically important economies of Latin America, Asia, and later on Africa, because of their interaction they had within the Heiligendamm-Aquila dialogue process that the G8 had with their outreach 5 countries. And since then, and starting from 2006, the initiative of Putin, then in 2008, in their own right, foreign ministers met in Yekaterinburg, and from 2009 we saw the leaders meeting, and it came to a regular format, which does mean that it's a growing and very important mechanism, and over the life of its own it did grow from skeptical and derogatory comments of Western and also its own public to a respected and cautious praise within and beyond. So as for coordination, yes, it's true that initially it was meant to coordinate with it. BRICS were meant to coordinate their positions within the G20, so it was a kind of response to their financial economic crisis of the 2008. And they did so quite successfully, I believe. There are still questions on the reform, and it's a long way to go, obviously. But it was thanks to BRICS, and to a large extent, that the G20 deliberations and discussions, they were included their decisions on increasing the emerging and developing countries' share in IMF and World Bank. Russia's initial position was 7%, but the final document stated not less than 5% to these ends, and this brought increase in their shares. So 4 out of countries out of BRICS became in the top 10 shareholders of their international finance. They will become once it's ratified, hopefully, probably not when it's supposed to be by the end of this year, but hopefully at least after their elections in the United States and when Europeans realize they have to move on. So once it's done, once this 2010 decision is implemented, then China will become third largest, and India, Russia, and Brazil 8th, 9th, and 10th respectively as shareholders in this institution. And together with a small portion of South Africa, they will be coming almost very close to a veto right of 15%. So it will be almost 15% total, which is a good potential, because this way they will be able to influence their international agenda. But it is not just the G20 that their BRICS are coordinating their efforts. It is also the agricultural area, where within their Food and Agriculture Organization they were decided on a number of mechanisms. And initially, agriculture ministers of BRICS decided to create the information sharing base, with each of the countries responsible for different sectors of this initiative. And later on, this was realized within the G20 mechanism as well, so-called AMIS, and BRICS also reacted to it. They will still preserve their own information sharing, but it will be in cooperation and not conflicting, but rather contributing more to so-called AMIS. United Nations, where all the countries initially have different positions, but when we saw South Africa gradually included at the initiative of China into the BRICS, it first voted counter to their, while it was still out of BRICS, but then had its position bridged, and at the meeting, at their summit, there were already joint position on Libya. On Syria, we saw that there are different approaches, but all 5 countries, they are very strongly in favor of diplomatic and peaceful means to deal with the conflict. So that's what groups them within the UN, even though there's still no commonality in terms of how the reform of the UN should go, which is slightly different, and especially China not ready to allow, especially its Indian colleague, into their permanent seat of the Security Council. So this remains unchanged. We saw also not complete coherence in terms of international World Bank next candidate, but otherwise they do share strategic lines of thought. And apart from the G20 and agriculture and FAO, I would say another point of interest would be their cooperation in UNCTAD. So they started, BRICS already meet on the level of trade ministers, and it was thanks to BRICS in a lot of senses that the last 13th ministerial UNCTAD conference ended with a more expanded mandate for this organization, which was hugely opposed by advanced economists, but BRICS managed to push this through. So there is a big potential for BRICS, and even in the worst case scenario of this not being a long-term endeavor, they already served as a bulldozer for their outdated international system to move it towards the changes. But I think there is a much better potential, and they will our countries will further realize commonality and common potential and common interests, and then it will make the reform rather than revolution smooth and fast.